Good morning, beautiful people of the center. What a beautiful introduction to our new focus. As you heard from our host Kelly, every month we look in a new direction to study the power of spiritual living. That's our focus for the whole year, the power of spiritual living. And we began in January with the power of intention, and we used Wayne Dyer's book by the same title. Then in February, we looked at the power of meditation and used a book by the same title written by some famous author. Yeah. And I'm delighted to say that this month our focus is the power of you, and it's the book, The Power of You, is written by somebody that we really love in this community, one of our most favorite guest speakers, and that is Dr. Chris Michaels, and it is just a lovely book. I thought you can purchase the book in advance because he's coming in the fourth week of this month, and you can get it autographed, and you won't have to stand in line. He's very popular. Listen to this on the back of the book cover by August Gold, who is the co-author of The Prayer Chest. She wrote these words: Chris Michaels is the Norman Vincent Peale for our generation. Wow. He has written a gateway book, one that introduces big, essential life questions about who we are and what we are here to do, and then answers them in simple and clear language. You're going to read this book with a highlighter. I don't like to write in books. I was raised to respect books, but I'll tell you something. I'm all over this book with a pen. I keep on underlining things because he writes ideas that are just startling. And it goes with our topic today, which is a bigger universe, a greater God. That's what he's writing about. And what I've got out of it so far is that the power of you and of me, the power in us, is determined by the idea we have of ourselves and how that fits into the scheme of things in this universe. And it is quite possible that that idea that you have of yourself and the place of the world comes from your early religious training, your cultural ideas, the ideas in your family. And it's very possible that those inherited ideas may be too small for who you really, really are. I grew up Catholic, and I loved it, really, I did. As a child, I just assumed everybody was Catholic. You know how children are. So it was a surprise for me when I got to school and I heard people whispering, other religions, and people saying, with raised eyebrows, they're Catholic, or whatever it was. And it instilled in me this sudden fear that maybe I had landed in the wrong religion. So I had this growing sense of anxiety that I had to find the right religion. So I started on an adventure. I went at a very young age. I started visiting other religious organizations. And I tell you, I highly recommend that. It was wonderful. The Pentecostals, the most lively bunch I ever met, I loved them. I just loved them. And the Methodists, I would stay for the hymns. Just amazing, just amazing. And the Episcopalians, well, I couldn't quite tell the difference between Catholic and, it was just too subtle for my young mind. I even managed to go to a conservative synagogue with a friend, and to tell the truth, I couldn't figure out what was happening. And I spoke to my Jewish friend, Rabbi George, about it. He said, yeah, that's basically pretty much how it is. So I felt okay that I wasn't making any assumptions about what was supposed to. I was seeing it through my filter, But the one thing throughout all of the journeying that stayed the same, I think, for me was this, all these places I visited were characterized by this idea, I think, that goes something like this. This is the right way. And each one of them were very confident in referring to their source material, their source documents, and it wasn't helping me at all. Because I still had no clear way of understanding which was the right way. Oh, it was such a great relief when one day in my youth I met some Hindus who seemed utterly disinterested in converting me to their faith. They seemed more enchanted with the idea that I would want to know something about theirs and they wanted to know about mine. It was so liberating. And I came to learn that many, many Hindus have such a large idea of the universe that it makes space for many, many, many different ways of understanding divinity. Many right ways, all concurrently correct. That was a big new idea for me, that we could have different ideas and at the same time be right. So big were the ideas that they were sharing with me that so many names were possible, like we heard in the song. And yet none of them was the ultimate. Like it says in the Tao Te Ching, the name is not the name. Instead, it is just something that points in the direction of that which cannot be pointed to. I was reading a book about Hinduism. I forget now the name of the author, but she explains the great difficulty that the Mormon church had in India. Because, according to some religions, part of their religious belief is to convert other people into their belief system. It exists. And their greatest failure was India. I picture the scene. The missionaries are sitting the Hindus down and saying, God conceived his own son through a virgin who then took form on the earth, taught, was betrayed and murdered, and then rose again from the dead to appear in a transfigured state to teach again, and then rose into heaven and is to come again. And the Hindus say, yes. That sounds quite reasonable. We have many stories just like that. Can you see the problem? No, well, you have to take this one. Well, they can't understand why. We want to, instead, the Hindus would say, we want to incorporate Jesus. We would very happily put the saint on the stage with everybody else. See, I just love that. And it was with equal delight that I met the teachings of the Center for Spiritual Living, because there was that same open-hearted inquiry where I came to discover that there are more questions than there are answers. Because I was introduced to the idea that I might have to recreate, reinvent, and rework my God idea that I came into the room with, because it was too small. And I didn't know that was an option. At first, I was very nervous about the idea. And I remember one of the teachers gave us the assignment and said, imagine if for some reason all of the people of the earth were lifted up and put on a new island, I don't know, the size of Australia, and all libraries and all universities and all source reference books about religion were all obliterated. And you were designated with the task of writing the curriculum for spirituality for every future generation, and you couldn't draw upon any existing texts. What would you say? What would you teach people about what's going on, about the nature of reality? What trip would you lay on future generations of children? Right? What a task! To think that I could make it up. And I felt such a sense of responsibility to think about it. And I think that's what our founder did, Ernest Holmes. I think he thought about it, about the question, what is going on here? What is this thing? Divinity. I remember reading in his Science of Mind textbook these words. There is a universal mind, spirit, intelligence that is the origin of everything. It is first cause, and this energy is in everything. There is one spirit back of all expression, and that is the meaning of the mystical saying, in him we live and move and have our being. See, he's referring to the Bible, Acts, the New Testament. In him, we move and breathe and have our being. And when I read that, it gave a whole new, bigger idea for me. In the universal mind is where I live. I had to think about that and move, and I breathe. That's where we be. That was a new idea. Dr. Chris Michaels, in his book, he talks about being in a Bible class as a young 7-year-old, and the Bible teacher was trying to explain that very verse from Acts, but in him we move and breathe and have our being. And she's trying to explain to children, and she said, basically it means you live in God's heart. And he said it was kind of confusing for a child because he could really understand that when things were going well, but when things weren't going so well, he wondered what part of God he was in. And he gets pretty feisty about it, right? Yeah, I'm not even going to read the quote about it. But he tells the story of his expanding idea of what God is in his life and how it came to the point where he had to rethink these scriptures. He said, you might say, in him we live and move and have our being, except God is not a him. It's a presence, not a person. It's a spirit, not a man. It's an indwelling presence, not an external deity. And that's one of the parts in the book that I highlighted, and I thought, I want to share with you some of the things in here because they are helping me to reconsider and regrow my idea of God. He says, I believe the time has come for a new concept of spirituality to emerge, one that will eclipse all world religions, and I believe it has already been born right here in you and me. That's a big idea. Because what it says to me is that your bigger idea of God, my bigger idea of God, is part of that new spirituality. And I think all that waits to be true is for you and I to articulate that and express it and to understand that our ideas, the way you think about God, is important and valid. I understand that our ancestors may have had to deal with a mysterious world and looking at the sun and the stars and the cycles and the ebb and flow of energies in the world had to create stories to help make sense of it. I understand that. And they came up with a certain type of God. But we today have access to so much more that we can, and I think ought to, reinvent the idea in a way that is more contemporary and makes sense to our world. The problem is, Dr. Michaels writes, is that billions of people in our world today still worship that old God. They think of God as a male deity who decides each person's fate based on behavior. They pray to him seeking personal gain and favor. They believe he has preferences, liking some people more than others, or one sports team better than another. And though we have seen major advances in every other area of 21st century life, we are still dragging around an outdated and archaic concept of God. Wow. I mean, I had to look and see what outdated idea am I dragging around, because it's easy to do, to revert back to those images from our comforting youth, if it was comforting. Very easy to revert back and say, am I dragging that around? You know? And you know, I say this with respect, but no matter which way you slice it, a God who is a man has got some serious personality disorders. One preacher once said to me, God created man, and then man returned the favor. Right? We made God in the image of us, testing, jealous, needing attention, needing worship, creating obstacles, experimenting with your choice skills. Can I believe in that? Can I believe in that with any kind of dignity? He says, I cannot believe in a God who would use disease or suffering as a tool to teach lessons or modify behavior. Isn't it time for that idea to slip away into the night? That's not how we teach our own children. We don't expose them to some harmful pathogen to make them sick so that they will learn their lessons in school. Right? Nor do we put up obstacles for them to overcome so that they can gain our love and acceptance. Right? What kind of diabolical plan would that be? Many religions are fond of saying that God is love, and yet their God doesn't act in very loving ways. I believe that God is love itself, and that it lives in us as our own capacity for love. Big ideas. Relocating the God idea to something very local, very personal. The place in which I live and breathe and move and have my being. And then grow the idea even beyond that and use the big words to meditate on, to grow it. In it, we move and breathe and have our being. Not just me, you. As you heard in the prayer, every being, everywhere, all the time. And the big word for that is universal. Not just in me, because I'm chosen. What's that? In all people, everywhere, all of the time. So when I'm talking about things like culture, religion, gender, wealth, politics, status, I'm not talking about my essential nature that is in the one. I'm talking about things that divide and separate us. It's a lovely practice, but it's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that which is the same in all people all the time. I'm looking for that in which we are united. See, universal also means present in equal proportion everywhere all of the time. So it's not thinner here, and then there's more of it over here. And you see, our inquiry into divinity ought to leave us going, huh? What does it mean? It ought to evoke in us additional questions. It ought to leave us wide open. Another concept growing word is permanent. The thing itself, whatever it is always like that. Wow. So if you're talking about that which changes, then you want to redirect your thought to look for that which doesn't change, that which is eternally the same, always in me. That which cannot be destroyed, that cannot be taken away. Oh, sure, it can be forgotten and covered over, but that which is eternally the same. You see, what changes is the endless forms that are possible to be created from it, the endless expressions, the endless experiences, endless possible forms that rise up from the one changeless one. So when we look at the sun and the planet and this body and this country and this culture, we can remember they are not permanent. And that is why they cannot ever be the source of our security and joy and equilibrium, we have to look further. Oh, another great word to grow, the God concept. Eternal, meaning that whatever it is, it didn't start and it doesn't end. In it, there is no before and no after. It can't be. So it means for me personally that I must think of it as available to me all the time in a very practical way. It means you and I, we don't become worthy of it one day through trial. I move in it, I'm in it. So worthy isn't even on the table for discussion. I'm just in it. And so when I'm looking for meaning, for the meaning of my life in things that are temporary, like people and positions and plans and prospects, and they're all delightful and should be enjoyed for what they are, but they can only deliver to me that which they are capable of. A temporary experience. Now, love, life, no end to what that can produce. And then it helps me mindfully consider, what do I want to worship? Oh, and another word, uncaused or causeless or has no origin. In other words, it was not made by something else. It always was. Without beginning, it predates the Big Bang. There wasn't anything to make it. That's what absolute means. It means one, whatever it is, not two. And it leaves us going, oh. Like that song, there's one power invisible, and yet you see it every day. One power indescribable, and you speak of it with every word you say. And I think that's the power of you, that is in you and me. It's in every one of us. It's in every one of us and can be experienced like a warm presence, like that of a close friend that is inside your own consciousness. That's how our founder described it with these words from his book, Living the Science of Mind. He says, you have a friend within you who is closer than your shadow. And this friend anticipates your every desire and knows your every need and governs your every act. This friend is the God within your own soul, the animating presence. This friend within you is infinite, and since it is infinite, it is not limited by previous experiences which you may have had, not by present conditions, and nor by passing situations. It has no inherited tendencies of lack or limitation. It has never been caught in the mesh of circumstances. It is at all times radiant and free and happy. It is your inner, absolute, and perfect self. This friend within you is different from all other persons, yet united with all. There is some part of you which reaches into the nature of others, thus irresistibly drawing them to you and drawing you to them, binding all together in one complete unity. The friend within you lives in a state of poise. It is above fear. It is beyond hurt. It is sufficient to itself. The friend within you is continuously looking after your well-being. It is always wishing you to be happy, to be well, to be radiant. Being the very fountain of your life, this friend is a luminous presence within, evermore emerging from pure spirit, evermore expanding your consciousness. It is the high counselor, the eternal guide. It is your intellect, the essence of your understanding, and more. There can be no greater unity than that which exists between you and this inner friend. It spreads a table before you in the wilderness of human thought. Its cup of joy in you runs over. It laughs at disaster over human failure. When this present experience shall be rolled up like a scroll, it will pass on to new and greater experiences. But today, this friend is here. So trust it then. Today, and you may trust it for all of the tomorrows yet to come, and possibly it will be difficult for you to believe that there is such a friend. But it is there, at the very center of your being, directing your thought and causing you to triumph over every defeat. For it is an unconquerable hero in you. It is the one who keeps silent watch within you, lifts your consciousness to the realization that you are forever one, forever safe, forever moving and breathing and having your being within the one. So I invite you now to take a moment with me to breathe in and to exhale into a moment of quiet contemplation so that we may just integrate these beautiful thoughts.